We all have routines. I'm Jabron, and with diabetes, mine was finger sticks. Sometimes I skip them because they hurt. The Freestyle Libre 3CGM changed that. It gives me glucose insights without finger sticks. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
Finger sticks are required if your glucose alarms or readings do not match symptoms, or when you see check blood glucose symbol for the first 12 hours. The views expressed should not be used for medical diagnosis or treatment as a substitute for professional medical advice. Individual circumstances may vary. For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Coming up this morning, we're going to talk with David Locke later in the show. David is going to join us to talk about the NBA draft and where the Jazz go with their free agent signings or acquisitions or trades or whatever they do. Backup center, veteran guard to handle the ball. We'll talk with David about that coming up. The NBA draft is done. Now it's time for the NHL draft to move front and center. Earlier this week, we talked with Stephen Ellis from the Daily Faceoff. He's an NHL draft and prospects analyst. Here's PK and I's conversation with Stephen. Stephen, good morning.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Well, that'll be largely dependent on what you say right here. You control our mood. Okay, that's overstated. No one believes that. We're doing well, but we are curious here. With this draft coming up, the Mammoth are getting better, and they made it to the playoffs, so they've had this run of super high draft picks and a chance to get these impact guys. Where they're drafting now, what should the expectations be? How good a player can they get?
I think when you're looking at that 19th pick, you're hoping to get a guy that's, at best, a top six player. If you're getting a forward there, you might get a defenseman who can go out there and be a good shutdown, second or third pairing guy. I think we know that Utah likes to draft big guys. We know that's kind of something that they typically have done. They've got, the reason why they're called Utah Mammoth is because they draft mammoth-sized people. But I think when you look at what's going to be available around that pick, you might get a Maxim Sokolovsky, who's 6'8". You might get a Adam Novotny, who's built like a tank. There's going to be some good players there. So it's going to be a different situation to last year's draft, or last two, I should say, where you went out and got a high-impact forward. You're probably not getting a guy that's anywhere close to that, but you're getting someone who might be a really good support player. And, at 19, you're probably happy with that.
Reading a bunch of different mock drafts, I saw one that said that they need a true power play quarterback. What the heck is that?
So that's a guy that basically, on the power play, he's a defenseman. It's a guy that's basically the one kind of leading the show, the one who's passing the puck everywhere, kind of distributing the plays. He's kind of controlling the pace there. And, a guy like Matthew Schaefer of the Islanders, Cale Makar, Colorado Avalanche, Quinn Hughes in the Minnesota Wild, basically guys that are going to play a ton of minutes and kind of control everything. That's going to be pretty hard to do at, number 19, but you're going to probably get a guy that you hope can at least impact the power play in some way.
When you list needs, how do you prioritize them for the Mammoth? Or is that just nothing they can worry about now, best player available on the board, who cares?
I think they've got one of the best pipelines. They've got one of the best prospect pools in the NHL, top 5-ish, I'd say. And I think that's something where they've got a lot of strength there. And I don't think they necessarily need to go out there and draft another 6'7" guy. I think they can go out there and try and find someone who plays with a bit more skill. A guy like Adam Novotny, who, watching with the World Juniors in Czechia, he didn't score a goal, but my God, it felt like he was trying harder than anybody else out there. He had the most shot generations out of anybody on the Czechs, who ended up coming in second place in that tournament. So he'd be very interesting. Maybe you go and get a guy like Elton Hermansen, who was dominant with Sweden the last 2 years internationally, might be one of the more pure skilled forwards in this draft. I think in general, this is a team that could add a bit more skill, maybe play in that top six and be impactful up front offensively, and maybe not draft someone who's out there to just take space up and just kill everybody out there.
Do you see a possibility of any type of trades, because you speak of these assets that they have and they could possibly move up if they wanted to?
When it comes to trades in the first round, I always am very hesitant. This is not like the NFL. This is not like the NBA. We don't typically see a ton of trades in the first round. Having said that, we did see Florida. We did see Ottawa trade a couple first round picks a few days ago in a pretty big deal with Brady Tkachuk, but that's not the norm. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what teams think. I will say this year's draft, after pick about 10, that's where the talent starts to really fall off a little bit. And that's something where, like, if you can get a guy who could help you immediately in the 19th pick is, one of the key parts of that trade. I think got to look at it there. But I feel like this is one where it feels like they're going to keep their pick at 19 just because, the trade market's not that great right now. I don't think there's a ton of guys you get super excited about. And I think maybe you worry about trading those guys later down the line.
Do teams invest in goaltenders the same way? Looking at mock drafts, I'm seeing no goalies picked until somewhere down in the 30s. What is the general league-wide attitude, and how much does it vary from team to team as far as developing goaltending?
Well, like, I'm a goalie myself. I think I should be drafted first overall. That's what I would say. I'm a little too old for the draft, but I think I would be that. But in general, goalies are the hardest position to really kind of figure out. Like, there was a time where goalies actually went first overall quite often. Like, you look at guys like Rick DiPietro and Roberto Luongo. Rick DiPietro, it didn't work at all out for the Islanders. They ended up signing to a 15-year deal, and they bought him out a few years later because he wasn't that good. So there's a lot of risk with goaltenders because there are very few true star caliber goalies. Now, that being said, there are some teams that you could look at later in that first round that don't have a ton of picks in the draft and might just look to acquire or to draft a goalie anyways and say, you know what, we've got a bunch of different, positional strengths already. Let's go and try and find one of the better goalies available. My guess is we're going to see about 3 or 4 goalies taken in the second round. And on the third and fourth, we're going to see a lot of goalies. Like, there are typically around, 20 goalies drafted every year, but none in the top couple rounds, because goalies take 4 or 5 years to really develop, and teams drafting high would rather pick a guy who could be available quicker. And with goalies, just sometimes, things like playing time could be difficult to come by at the lower levels. They aren't playing every single game, so it's harder. So teams don't typically like to draft goalies early because there's just a lot more a risk associated with it. So I wouldn't expect to see any taken in the first round this year.
If what I hear is correct, you would take yourself over Gavin McKenna?
Well, yeah, I think, when you look at Gavin McKenna, I haven't seen him get into any goalie fights recently. I have, I think there's that. I did get 22 penalty minutes in one game. So, like, if you need to add some toughness, I could definitely do it. Wow. And, I hope the scouts are just not looking at my recent results, a couple of tougher games. But I have 4 games for myself scheduled on Thursday. But that's the night, like, I'm in Buffalo. I'm going to miss it all. But that's the time where scouts will finally see that I'm the right choice for number 1.
Do you view McKenna as the obvious number 1?
Yeah, I think McKenna's for sure the number 1. In my opinion, he's so skilled, so smart. This is a guy I've been watching for 4 or 5 years at this point. And I think a lot of people made a big stink kind of about how his first half of college hockey was. And yeah, he wasn't that great, but he's playing 21 minutes a night as, a 17 turned 18-year-old guy in a program at Penn State that just didn't have a ton of scoring depth. And the fact that he looked as good as he did, I think is actually quite impressive. And that's the kind of guy that Toronto needs, someone who's skilled, who can set up a guy like Austin Matthews and try to create long-term damage there. But I will also point out that, Austin Matthews needed a playmaking winger. They just got rid of one in Mitch Marner. He had a pretty good run with the Vegas Golden Knights this year. McKenna's not as rounded as Mitch Marner, so we'll see what happens. But from a pure skill perspective, he's the best player in the draft.
Obviously, the Mammoth not drafting as high this year, and it'll take some time. But the other guys who've been picked higher, who have been in the pipeline for a while now, who do you think is about ready to join the Mammoth, and who do you think will have the most impact when they do join, even if they're not the next one up?
So you look at a guy like T.J. Ginla, and he was the best player in junior hockey this year. He didn't win any major awards, but like if I was voting on the WHL MVP, he would have been my pick because he was that good this year. You look at a guy like Cole Baudouin, outstanding regular season, was dominant in the playoffs. Great. Now, like, Barry was nowhere as strong when he wasn't playing out there. Caleb Denoyer was picked in the top 5 last year of the draft. Very productive in Moncton this year. Very fun team. Gabe Smith was kind of one of the guys he played with, and he was outstanding there too. So you got the Russians in Simashev and Daniil Boot that are interesting. And then I I wasn't a big fan for a while on Michael Arabel, the goaltender. He's massive, but I think when you look at what he was able to do this year in college and then a pretty impressive run to finish the year in the AHL, I think he's maybe Utah's goalie of the future. So like this is a strong pipeline. You've got a lot of high-end talents there. Iginla's the guy that I think is going to be the one selling all the jerseys, the one that's going to be so exciting. His dad, Jerome Iginla, NHL legend, but Tej, aggressive forward, strong, good shot. He's a fan favorite. So he's a guy that's going to be really fun to watch. And I think he should be in the lineup next year.
Yeah, okay, so we got that. We got a timeline for him, and people are talking about him and anticipating that. When you draft as low as they're drafting, what would be your timeline for a player to be able to make his mark with the Mammoth?
I think it really kind of depends on who they take. Like if they take a guy like Novotny, who I really like, I feel like that's one where probably 2 years from now, you're looking at him trying to make the roster. Guy like, Oscar Hemming, maybe he spends 1 more year in college and then you look at him. I think the bigger, more physically mature players are the ones that typically transition to the NHL a little bit better than a smaller skilled guy. But, you might not get like a guy like Oscar Hemming might not be as talented as Elton Hermanson. Do you want to pass on that pure skill, a guy who can maybe be a top line player, or do you want to have a guy like Hemming where he's a bit more of an all around player, two-way guy, big 6'4" frame? So it really depends on the type of guy, but realistically, we're looking 2 to 3 years most likely for these type of players.
You mentioned going for size, and you mentioned a 6'8" prospect. Maverick Lamoureux was up, and he is just standing next to that guy in the locker room. He is just massive. At what point, his size is great, but also the center of gravity changes, and that can be a problem. So what is the max height for a really good NHL player?
It's very interesting because you look at this year, there's actually a guy who's 7'1" from Moldova who's going to get drafted, Alexander Karmanov. Probably the worst skater I've ever seen, but you could probably find some 13-year-olds who could just skate. Actually, I shouldn't say 13, probably 8-year-olds who could outskate him, but he's 7'1". Try it. You look at the tallest guys of all time in the NHL, and someone like Zdeno Chara at 6'9", he's got that size. He is one of the best defensemen of his era. Then you look at Curtis Douglas, a forward, also 6'9", not quick. He's more of a tough guy. I think you're looking at that sweet spot almost being 6'3", 6'4", because usually those guys are still light enough to be able to skate, but strong enough to be more of a physical player. Anything after that, Tage Thompson is 6'7", but he's kind of like a physical anomaly. He's not normal. You're not going to find guys like that. So a guy like Daniel Boot being 6'5", it's interesting to kind of see what happens. But when it comes to defensemen in particular, you typically want these guys who've got that size because they take up that space and they're tough to push around. That being said, I think a lot of smaller defensemen are taking over, like Lane Hudson, Matthew Schaefer. Neither of those guys are that big, and they're two of the most skilled guys in the NHL. And I think you kind of have to find the right mix. Defensemen are starting to get a little smaller. I say that knowing not a single defenseman under 6 foot was drafted last year, but centers are also getting bigger. Kind of in contrast, we're seeing a lot of teams that are taking 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" centers. It feels though like the sweet spot of perfect size is 6'3", 6'4".
Stepping away from the draft, what do you think the team needs to improve upon to be able to do better than it did last year? Because all about last year was getting to the playoff. That was the stated goal, and they got there. Well, all right, now you got to up the ante a little bit here.
I think you just got to look at, the game-to-game consistency out there, make sure that, obviously Clayton Keller having the season he did was great. Can Nick Schmaltz continue to be this high-impact guy? He was a fantasy goldmine for so long. Getting a guy like J.J. Peterka to maybe become a 50, 55-point guy would be big. Logan Cooley missing as much time as he did obviously didn't help. So I think you're just kind of looking for those guys to just continue to be, more offensively minded there. Yeah, you got to get that consistent goaltending. Obviously, if they'll make you look at the near 40 wins, workhorse guy, you probably want to have a backup goalie you can really rely on, though. A guy that can go out there and win games, because you look at the difference in the stats between him and Vitek Vanacek, and Vanacek often didn't look like an NHL goalie out there. So I think finding that right backup goalie will be interesting, but then also just making sure everyone could stay healthy. Another year, Mackenzie Weegar is going to be nice. And I like what we've seen out of guys like Cooley and Keller. You just got to get that game-to-game consistency so you're tougher to play against.
Stephen Ellis joined us, NHL draft and prospects analyst for the Daily Faceoff. There's a couple different age groups on this Mammoth roster. You've got guys like Keller and Sergachev. They're in their prime. And that kind of suggests that maybe they should move some of these prospects and go all in and get a group that can win here in the next 2-3 years. But also, Cooley and Gunther are young, and with all these prospects is an argument for, hey, do the best you can in the next 2-3 years, but don't short-circuit the future because Gunther and Cooley are young enough, and how many of these prospects are going to pay off, that's the real sweet spot for the organization. Which timeline do you like? Where would you push your chips?
I think, you're looking like Sergachev's 27, Keller's 27, right? Like those guys are interesting. Durzee's 27. You got McBain, Hayden, that 26 age, Paterka 24, Gunther. Like, I feel like this is something where you could probably look at this and say, like, maybe 3 years until they're really ready to go. Because I think when you also look at what this team was before moving to Utah, like Bill Armstrong had like no money to work with. This was a team that was so financially cap strapped. They're still having to work hard to like prove to players around the NHL, like, hey, like this is a team you want to come join and be very effective. And I feel like Armstrong's done a very good job so far, but I still think we're talking a few more years, like 3-4 years, like a Ginla, when he's kind of really hitting his stride. That's where things are going to get really interesting for this team. So I wouldn't kind of sell the farm here, but I think their core has still got a couple years where you could say like, okay, 30, like let's say when Sergei's 30, like maybe still play some really good hockey until he's 33, 34. That's kind of what you're banking on there. He won't get better in his 30s. That just typically doesn't happen, but I think it's still something where, 2 to 3 years is kind of what you're looking at and saying that's when you want to be very competitive. And they've got time to make some trades. You asked about what if they traded that first round pick. Like, I think there's still a good argument for it, but it's got to be for the right price and the right pick. And it's not sure who on the market would be worth kind of moving a first round pick for right now.
All right, there's Stephen Ellis, daily Faceoff NHL draft and prospect analyst. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Jay Stevens from KSL Sports talking NHL draft. That's next. Stay with us.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
We all have routines. I'm Jabron, and with diabetes, mine was finger sticks. Sometimes I skip them because it hurt. The Freestyle Libre 3CGM changed that. It gives me glucose insights without finger sticks. Learn more at freestylelibre.us.
Finger sticks are required if your glucose alarms and readings do not match symptoms, or when you see check blood glucose symbol for the first 12 hours. The views expressed should not be used for medical diagnosis or treatment as a substitute for professional medical advice. Individual circumstances may vary. For prescription only. Safety info found at freestylelibre.us.
Ice Cube's Big 3 is back. The most competitive basketball league on earth is on CBS this Saturday. Big 3 All-Star Dwight Howard and the LA Ryan take on Greg Monroe and the Dallas Power. Then in another clash of undefeated teams, Earl Clark and Coach Steven Jackson lead the DMV Trilogy against Montrezl Harrell, Coach Dr. J, and the Chicago Triplets. The game played the way you love. Watch live Saturday on CBS at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and catch replays Monday on BET. Presented by iHeart.
Make game day yours. Tickets, food and drinks, stats, and streaming. Everything you need is in the Utah Mammoth app. Download today and make game night easy. Download on both Android and iPhone. Tusk Top.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We're joined by Jay Stevens, NHL insider for KSL Sports and host of the Utah Puck Report. Jay, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good. We're looking for a little clarity here on the NHL draft, but the Mammoth are drafting 19, so maybe you're looking for clarity too, and you won't get it until pick 19. I'm curious what the hit rate is on pick 19. What should the level of expectation be?
You know what? There have been some really big picks come at 19. I was researching that a little bit just the other day, and I was surprised to see at some of the guys that were captains of NHL teams that were picked at 19. And then there's also a bunch of guys that you find in the second round that bloom. That's the one thing about drafting at 18 years old, right? You're not 100% sure how these kids are going to be. So looking at what the Mammoth were actually in need of and really everything they need to be better is already in the pipeline. So, I did a lot of research over the last 10 days trying to figure out exactly what they need, just like I'm sure you guys have been doing as well and getting ready for the NBA draft that went really well. But yeah, I think Utah's got some spots they can fill. They got a couple of guys that might still be there. And then what I honestly think they're going to do is pull another goalie. And I haven't heard anybody else talk about that yet.
Yeah, we had somebody on, I can't remember, earlier in the week was talking about that very thing, that, what do they need? And certainly he mentioned that position. And so we'll see how that develops, and maybe they go not necessarily through the draft. Do you think there are other ways? And they've got at least one prospect in the pipeline, but how do you think that they will address that particular need for what's best for this coming season?
Yeah, for this coming season, they're going to have to pick up a goalie off free agency. There's a lot of talk right now about Utah doing something with Detroit to pick up Dylan Larkin. And Detroit also has an up-and-coming goalie that's ready for the NHL in Sebastian Koso. And that could be something that really happens. And I didn't believe it when it first started. But if you look, if Utah really put together a good package, including this 19th pick, including next year's first-round pick, because honestly, I don't think Utah needs it at this point. They have so many prospects. They're going to be good for so long. They could skip a couple of years of first-round picks, pick up a player that they plug in right now. So if you put together a decent package, I know they haven't re-signed Barrett Hayton yet. There's a couple other pieces, even a Tanev that a team like Detroit would be interested in. And then package something else and put that together, you could end up with a up-and-coming AHL goalie that's ready for the NHL in Koso, and then you could also pick up Dylan Larkin if the package is good enough. And then that puts Utah in an unbelievable position for this upcoming season. If that's not what they do, there are some really good some free agent goalies that are on the market. I mean, there's some really big names, including Bobrovsky, Frederik Andersen, who both have won Stanley Cups in the last 2 years. And they're both free agents. Bobrovsky's going to want a lot of money, even though he's old. He's been in the league, 15, 16 years already. So you could see some of that happening, and those are all realistic. But really what the other real possibility is, there's some of those AHL goalies that will no longer be under waiver protection. So right now, if you pull a guy up and then you have to send him back down for something, another team could just claim him off waivers. And that's what happened with Bussy, who went on to win the Stanley Cup this year. So I found 3 goalies that are NHL ready that at some point in the first month of the season will get sent back down to their minor league team. And that's a chance that Utah could take and pull that up too, and just start with one of our AHL goalies. And we do have 2 experienced AHL goalies in the Utah franchise too, with Stauber and Matt Villalta, who everybody just loves both those goalies, their personality, their work ethic. So there are pieces there. So honestly, I would like to see Utah trade this pick.
There's also the theory that they got a lot of guys who are born in the 90s, right? So you're all 26 or older. And if you're drafting a teenager now, an 18, 19-year-old, you're drafting for at least like 3 years out. Isn't there a theory you can never have enough good, young, inexpensive talent? So just find a really good player. Who cares? Center, winger, defenseman, goaltender. You can't have enough good talent. If there's someone that the scouts really believe in and that the front office really believes in, just go get them. And it may not look like it fits now because they got a lot of talent in the pipeline. But if the player's really good, you need 3 or 4 lines. You need 3 pairs of defensemen. There'll be a spot for them when the time comes.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of injuries in hockey too. So you do use minor league guys a lot. You get a lot of chances to see what you've drafted and how they're turning out. And just because you draft somebody now doesn't mean you're going to see them for 3 years. Like everybody just assumed Tidja Ginla was going to be in the lineup the next season, but they sent him back down to juniors for 2 years to cook, and there's no guarantee he makes the roster this year. And you're right; those guys are cheap. Your first 3 years are $970,000, and that's for every first round player. You get $970 up front, $970 a year for 3 years once you sign. So that does make sense. There is a goaltender that they've seen play a lot because he was playing with the Ginla in Kelowna, a kid named Harrison Bodinger. He's going to end up playing at Denver University, who In the hockey world, we called it 10 for University because they had 10 national championships up until this year when they won their 11th. So I don't know what kind of a cute rhyme you're going to come up with, but this kid's going to be playing at Denver University for the next couple of years. He's already shown a real upward mobility as far as the last 2 years. He just keeps getting better and better. He had a great year in the WHL this year, and he's going to be on that team that's not only do they win, and a lot of times you don't look at goalies on winning teams, but this kid's played in a lot of hard spots and just keeps winning. So you're going to put him in Denver. They have great goalie coaches in Denver. They have a great overall coach in Dave Carl. So that could be the guy you go get. He's Colorado born. He's an American, from Arvada. He's a local boy, basically, as far as hockey goes for Utah. Colorado and Utah have been basically sisters for hockey for a long time. So that's kind of who I think they're going to pick, just because of they've seen him a lot, because they watch again a lot. He has a lot of upward talent. And as far as the depth pool of prospects, they're a little light on goaltenders.
All right, I think I got it, Jay. Denver, since they are at 10 and you want to go something catchy for 11, they're known as the Mile High, so they play at elevation. So when you play Denver, you play at 11 ovation.
I like it. Let's trademark it. I'll get T-shirts made.
T-shirts and ball caps coming. We got merch.
That's the best that I could do on such short notice.
That's way better than I could have done.
You mentioned about trade, and that's what trade out of the pick. And we've seen teams do that. I mean, the Knicks just did that on Tuesday. They traded out of their first-round pick because they didn't want to have to pay somebody, right? And so they got compensation, second-rounders, blah, blah, blah. How about also the opportunity you mentioned, putting together a package, but maybe moving up rather than trading out?
Yeah, they're just, besides the top 3 guys in the draft this year, there really isn't a reason to try to move up. And even the top 3 is now debated on who's going to be the best, because they had Gavin McKenna, who for the last 2 years is supposed to be the up-and-coming and a generational talent. He's the first one that's part of that experiment where he played major juniors and then played NCAA, and that's supposed to be the new finding tool to make this kid razor sharp. And there's a real debate whether or not he's even going to go first. So you got maybe your top 5 will be great. If you can't get number 1 or 2, I can't see moving up, especially when you have so many top 10 picks just chomping at the bit right now. And you're right, it's fine to sign one and put them in the minors, but you've got so many that are going to take up spots for the next 5 or 6 years that I can't see giving up anybody to move up unless somebody's willing to take Tanev and I don't even know what else you'd offer up. I know a lot of people keep bringing up Peterka. There's no way. Plus, he has a no trade. So I just can't see that making sense for Utah right now. But man, Bill Armstrong, he's told us what he's going to do, and he's stuck to this long-term plan. But then he always has this little surprise, like bringing in Peterka, which was a great move last year, and getting Nate Schmidt, which surprised everybody and turned out to be a great move. So I wouldn't put anything past them. I just don't see that making sense for the team at this point.
The thing about Peterka, there were certainly some good things and some good numbers, but it wasn't really what people were hoping for. They were hoping for, the tape measure grand slam homer but giving him a year, he's still relatively young and he gets traded. Is there a chance that he settles in and that this year looks a lot better than last year? Even though last year had some decent numbers in it, couldn't the goals and assists and the production just go off the charts in year 2? Would that be that big a surprise?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. And that's the one thing I've been saying about Peterka the whole time. People keep comparing him to Doan. And Doan had a breakout year this year, which is great. He's in a different system. They're the same age. That's the other thing people keep forgetting. We traded age for age. They're the same age. Peterka is an offensive player. He had 0 defensive parts to his game. And the Utah Mammoth really kind of cracked him down and said, hey, you're going to play both sides of the ice. You're going to learn to play defense and then play offense. And that's something that they didn't have him do in Buffalo, and he didn't have to do it in juniors. And it's something they completely changed his game. So, yeah, coming back to year 2, knowing the system better, they found a good place for him on the lines. I think you're going to see a lot more production out of him. And, I'd like to see him play more with Cooley. I thought he matched really well with Yamamoto, but they left him with Kerfoot and Carcone, and that seemed to really start finding that full game for him. I expect a little bit of a tweak on that line next year. Carcone's coming back. I don't know if they're going to re-sign Kerfoot. There's a lot of people fighting for those spots. But Peterka with Carcone, and it's something else there, another fast offensive player that can help defensively too and take a little bit of that pressure off him. You could see big numbers out of Peterka, and that's what Utah expected. They didn't expect him to come in and adapt right away. They knew he was going to struggle a bit fitting into the new system. And so they're fine with it. And I think this year is going to be a really big year for them.
I think that's a situation that they are facing in multiple situations because they have young talent, but it's tantalizing to want to just press on the gas a little bit and make a move that you think can help you in the immediacy, but the fear is giving up someone who can come up and then help you in the long term. And it's somewhat of a good problem to have because that means you have enticing prospects in the system that other people want. But for Armstrong and his people, it's something that he's going to have to contemplate annually for the next few years and decide. Now, if the big club wins, then you can wait. But if it gets there and just comes up a little short, you see what I'm saying? It's going to be a tantalizing possibility for management for what? How many years? The next 2 to 3?
Yeah, definitely the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, you're seeing these kids that want a spot on the team. And most of these kids, if you look at where they are drafted, the people that were drafted around them have already got NHL games. And normally you would think, well, if they were with Arizona, they'd already be in the league because Arizona was a terrible team and they always got rid of their most expensive talent. But now that they're Utah, they're more established. You do have all that stuff. The best way I heard it described was you have all the pots, or you have all these parts to make your stew, and you've got your crock pot over here. Now you got to put all the parts in there, and then you got to let the crock pot do its thing. Quit opening it, quit trying to add other things. Let everything season, let everything cook, and you're going to have an amazing stew, but it's not going to be this year. The Utah Mammoth are not going to win the Stanley Cup this upcoming season. It's 2 to 3, 4 years down the road, and you're going to have a lot of different names than you're used to right now. Keller will still be there. Cooley and Gunther will still be there. Krause will probably still be there. You anticipate Peterka being there. But then you're going to have Ginla, Denoye. I think Gabe Smith makes the team. Cole Baudouin. I mean, these are kids that are just chomping at the bit and ready to play. And then there are a lot of other teams they'd already be in the NHL. So let the crock pot do its thing, and you're going to have an amazing team. And they've done it. Like, I've never seen, I guess maybe with St. Louis, but I've never seen a GM be as patient and as calculating as what Utah has right now. And it's pretty cool to watch. It's boring as a journalist, right? It's boring to be like, I'm waiting for some major big trade because they have the money and they have the potential and they have assets. But, man, they're just letting that stew cook, and it's going to be fun when it's ready.
Yeah. Number one, I'm getting really hungry.
I use that crock pot thing example. I was making fun of my wife. She's gotten a lot better in golf, and I was telling another lady, oh, yeah, and I know, but her cooking has really suffered. And she looks at me and she says, that's what a crock pot is for.
If you're looking, you're not cooking. That's the old crock pot analogy. Quit looking at it. I need your wife to give me some golf lessons.
Hey, if she actually is very good. Yeah, club champion. Shh, keep it quiet. 2 times. I do think, though, that Bill's giving you the Sergachev deal and he's giving you the Peterka deal, so I think there's a part of him that's saying, like, hey, Jay, how much you want out of me, huh? Come on.
Yeah, if there's something there, he'll take it for sure, right? Yeah. But it's a cool, calculated move. It's not – and he says he'll come up with something and he'll call a couple other GMs and throw something at the wall and be like, hey, what about this? This works for us. This should work for you. Everybody's happy. Everybody's a little bit sad. And, that's how we got Peterka. That's how Utah got Sergachev. Nobody thought Sergachev would be traded. He was a day away from his no-trade kicking in. They'd won 2 cups. Nobody thought that was going to happen. So, I mean, that was a pretty bold move.
There's Jay Stevens. When we come back, we'll switch to hoops. Drew Hill, the Daily Memphian. What does he think of the Memphis Grizzlies? So many ties to Utah. Now, obviously, they just drafted Richie Saunders from BYU, but with the teams making the trade, there's some players there. Obviously, Cameron Boozer as well. Having son of Carlos Boozer, former Jazz man. We'll get to all of that next. Stay with us right here on The Zone.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's room of choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Ice Cube's Big 3 is back. The most competitive basketball league on earth is on CBS this Saturday. Big 3 All-Star Dwight Howard and the LA Ryan take on Greg Monroe and the Dallas Power. Then in another clash of undefeated teams, Earl Clark and Coach Steven Jackson lead the DMV Trilogy against Montrezl Harrell, Coach Dr. J, and the Chicago Triplets. The game played the way you love. Watch live Saturday on CBS at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and catch replays Monday on BET. Presented by iHeart.
DJ and PK, it's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. We're joined by Drew Hill, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer, sports columnist for the Daily Memphian. Drew, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. The Grizzlies, how quick are they going to turn this thing over? It looks like the Jazz had to tank for 4 years. I'm not sure the Grizzlies are going to move that slowly.
No, I mean, they're hoping it's not going to take quite as long as it took Utah to change things around. But at the very least, this team is going to be a lot more fun next year. I think they have made that clear. Adding a player like Cam Boozer, who everyone knows. I mean, the city is ecstatic about adding someone like him. And then Isaiah Stewart, who keeps things interesting, as well as Richie Saunders and Kareem Lopez, who both have very interesting stories as they now come to Memphis. The team will be introducing everyone except for Isaiah Stewart there later this afternoon, and it's safe to say people are really excited. It's been a difficult 3 years here in Memphis because they had to turn the page on the last era, which started with a lot of promise and trended the wrong way over several seasons. And I think people were really dreading like the restart, the rebuild, the push of the button, and they did it. And pretty quickly afterwards, that the opinion started to change and people started to get excited again.
What did you hear about as to why they liked to draft Richie Saunders, obviously very high in the second round?
Yeah, so I think Richie fits what the Grizzlies have prioritized over the last few years in the draft. When you look at their history, about 75% of the players that Zach Kleiman, the GM here, has selected in the draft, about 75% of them are older, productive college basketball players with high efficiency numbers. And to his credit, I think the more analytical approach to drafting players has really paid off for the franchise in the past. I know they haven't had the success at the highest levels of the NBA, but a lot of these guys that they've grabbed in the second round have turned out to be tremendous players. This is, Jalen Wells, Vince Williams Jr., even John Contrar, who signed as a two-way player and went undrafted. Like they have been able, Gigi Jackson, they've been able to nab a lot of really high-level players late in drafts. Now, some of them come with different profiles, like Gigi and Jalen Wells, not quite as productive in college. Most of them fit this mold that Richie Saunders, will enter Memphis with. You can kind of compare the way he played to, some of the statistics of Asante Aldama, right? Every player had some sort of defining trait. And I think for Richie, they're really excited about his competitive fire, his toughness, and his shooting. Memphis had a real problem last year, which was that they just weren't tough enough. They had a team that was too much finesse and not enough physicality. They went completely in the opposite direction when they drafted Boozer and traded for Isaiah Stewart. And although he's a guard, I think Richie, they think, is going to bring a level of toughness and competitive fire that they desperately need. So they're excited to add a new shooter, somebody that they think will be great in the locker room. It remains to be seen, what kind of contract he's going to be on. I think they have to sort of wait for the rehab process to play out and see what sort of space that they will have for him on the roster. But they're definitely excited for him to get to Memphis today.
The second round picks really aren't names. It's not stars. I mean, here, we're just hearing about the Joker, second round pick, MVP and all that. But there are guys who consistently play 15, 20 minutes a game. And so many second rounders don't even stick in the league. So if you can find someone who can play 15, 20 minutes a game, I'm curious if the Grizzlies identified their starters going forward. How many of the guys can you look at and say, there's a guy, even if it didn't start, that guy's going to play 30 minutes a game? Those are starter minutes whether you come off the bench or not. How set is that, and how much is that still a work in progress for Memphis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And 30 minutes per game is a lot here. I mean, they've got a coach who comes from Europe that runs the short shifts, and there's been a lot of complaints from fans that, that they don't play their starters enough. I think there are three in particular that are solidified. That's Cedric Coward, Cameron Boozer now, and Zach Edey. Those three are the pieces that they're really looking at as their building blocks going forward, their long-term options. I think they feel good about Jalen Wells and where he has gotten to at this early stage of his career. He isn't an overly flashy player. He's not going to get a lot of attention outside of Memphis, but he is very consistent and as solid as they come. I don't necessarily think he's solidified as a long-term starter yet, but I think he's definitely in the conversation as a piece that the Grizzlies feel good about going forward. So I would start there. I think beyond that, the future of Ja Morant is likely not in Memphis, as everyone has continued to report. I don't think anything is changing with that. And so there's kind of this backcourt logjam that they have right now beyond Ja of players, some young and some older. Ty Jerome, Scottie Pippen Jr. They traded for Walter Clayton, as you guys know, out in Utah. They have a bunch of different options in the backcourt. Now you add Richie Saunders. It'll be really interesting to see how they sort of deploy those guys. And I know I'm on the phone to talk about Richie. I could see him playing, when he comes back from this ACL injury. I could see him playing a role like you see Baylor Shireman play for the Boston Celtics, where he was on the court for, I think, 77 games and had an impact. That he was able to play on the ball, able to play off the ball a little bit, was a shooter and was able to grab some rebounds for Boston, long rebounds, and I think help them space the floor for some of their more physical players. I think that's the type of role you could imagine Richie Saunders and the fit, where he could make himself fit in with Memphis early on in his career.
It's funny, the connections now, right? The big trade, we got Jaren Jackson here in town, and the Memphis Grizzlies get Taylor Hendricks. You already mentioned Clayton, Richie Saunders. Even I think we're going to be watching with a keen eye Cameron Boozer for multiple reasons. He was actually born here because his dad was playing for the Jazz, but certainly, obviously, the Jazz could have drafted him, and they chose, and then Memphis willingly, I think gladly, and I think they're going to get a fine ball player in Cameron Boozer. So the connections are strong between these two teams here. It's kind of funny how that worked out. Give us a little insight now. It was just, the extended end of the season, but how Hendricks and Clayton worked out for them.
Yeah, I think Walter Clayton struggled for Memphis after the trade and didn't necessarily find his rhythm at any point in the season. Now, it was difficult because we all watched the Utah and Memphis matchup late in the season. We all know what these teams were trying to accomplish, trying to maximize some of these draft odds towards the end of the year. So players were in and out of the lineup. The injury list was like a grocery list. It was so long. And it didn't really allow any of those guys to really find true form over the course of, the last few months. And so with Clayton, I think given the logjam that exists already that I mentioned at the guard position, the fact that they have a lot of undersized guards, I'm not sure what his future will look like with Memphis. I think that he's a player that has a lot to prove still. Hendricks played a little bit better. He gave the Grizzlies some good minutes and rebounded the ball well towards the end of the season. He had a couple games where he popped up and was a standout on the stat sheet. But I'm not sure either player is like someone that the Grizzlies are attaching their future to at this stage. I think that the trade with Jackson, those guys were more about salary match, and it was more about the assets that the Grizzlies brought in that was most important to the team. And so, long story short, I'm not sure either of those guys have a long-term future in Memphis, but they'll have an opportunity again this offseason to sort of show what they can do.
We just had the story about a trio of trade rumors popping up with Jaylen Brown in Boston, LaMelo Ball in Charlotte, Kawhi Leonard with the Clippers, and then, it's like almost immediately Ball gets traded to Minnesota. I didn't hear Morant's name in any of that. Is there any market for him at all? Will he just be bought out and do the stretch thing that Milwaukee did with Damian Lillard? Would they actually bring him back and put him in a locker room with all these young guys? What does the future hold for him here?
Yeah, there's uncertainty with that for sure. I don't think that there are answers, in June for some of those questions. I do think in terms of a market, there's still some confidence that something will get done, that somebody will eventually make a trade and Ja can find a new landing spot. But if that does not work out, I do think it is a possibility that eventually you get to the point where there's a buyout situation that allows Ja to go somewhere he would like to go versus wherever the Grizzlies would like to trade him. I think, it's surprising still to some Grizzlies fans here that the player that arrived in Memphis that had by far the biggest platform and was the biggest star that the city has ever had from a celebrity standpoint, that the Grizzlies would be so eager to part ways with a player like that. And so, I think for a lot of people, they see the name Ja Morant and they think, well, how can the Grizzlies not get anything for that guy, especially folks locally? And the reality of it is that he just hasn't played in enough games to inspire confidence to trade for a player like him. He's just had too many injury problems. There's the history of the stuff off the court, although that's now several years in the past. So maybe they can just sort of put that behind him. The problem is that he's a very expensive player who still has 2 more years on a max contract, and he hasn't played in basketball games. And I can understand why NBA competitors, teams that are looking at Memphis trying to figure out who they might want to add to their own roster might be a little turned off by that.
Are they looking, in your opinion, to have the foundation going forward be Boozer?
Yes. It'll be fascinating to see what he has to say today, because in the past the team has sort of tempered down expectations when it comes to these rookie introductions. And, it's one thing to do that for players like David Roddy and Jake LaRavia and Santi Aldama and those types of players that you took in the middle round of the first. And it's another thing to introduce a player like Cameron Boozer, who they hosted a draft watch party for, and thousands of people showed up at the arena to get excited about him. And he played for the most prominent college basketball team on national television every single night, and every fan knows him. He was a National Player of the Year winner as a true freshman at Duke. He's the son of an NBA legend. He's just so high profile that you can't really hide the expectations if you're Memphis this time. And so I'm very much looking forward to what Cameron will have to say today when he is asked, which I'm sure he will be, how he plans to be the new face of this franchise and, what sort of requirements come with that, because there's been frustrations. It's been obvious there's been frustrations with Ja and the way that the last iteration of this franchise sort of fell apart, and the responsibility that some of the star players had in that. And they want somebody that's going to get into Memphis and is going to be a leader and is going to change the course of this franchise and change the direction and make everybody sort of feel more optimistic than they have in the past. And that's going to be Cam's responsibility. It's a lot to put on an 18-year-old's shoulders, but I think if there's anybody to do it, it's Cam. I had the chance to talk to Carlos in New York at the draft the last couple of days, and, he seems very, very excited for his son and thinks his son is ready for that responsibility. So it should be a fun day as they introduce him here at FedEx Forum.
I would think that Boozer should be the early front runner for Rookie of the Year. I mean, AJ DeBonsa figures Trey Young just got $200 million. I figure he's going to get 200 million touches and shots. So AJ is going to have a hard time building massive stats because Trey's going to have the ball. And then in Utah, there's 4 or 5 guys who can score. So Peterson will score, but I don't think it's going to be outrageous because there are going to be a lot of guys getting shots. Whereas it looks like Boozer could have the ball in his hands a lot. He's a good passer. He's a willing passer. He can score it. I don't see why he won't pile up a bunch of stats there and make himself the front runner. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, no, I think he is the technical front runner if you're going to go by the wise guys in Vegas to win Rookie of the Year. And I think that's right, because if Ja Morant isn't on the Grizzlies roster, which people don't expect him to be, the Grizzlies drafted Boozer in part because they want him to be their offensive hub, right? One of the best traits that he brought as a prospect was his passing and his ability to read the game and connect teammates and sort of make an offense work. And I think from a statistical perspective, he's going to get the rebounds. He's going to score the points. He may not be the most flashy of those top 3 players that went off the board, but he's certainly in the best position to, sort of rack up the statistics. I think he probably is the rightful favorite to win Rookie of the Year, not necessarily because of talent level, but just because of what surrounds him on his team. He's probably going to be asked to do the most, the quickest when it comes to this rookie class.
Well, we appreciate a few minutes. As PK says, there are a lot of ties here. We'll be keeping an eye on the Grizzlies. Drew, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
There's Drew Hill from the Daily Memphian. When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Ice Cube's Big 3 is back. The most competitive basketball league on earth is on CBS this Saturday. Big 3 All-Star Dwight Howard and the LA Riot take on Greg Monroe and the Dallas Power. Then in another clash of undefeated teams, Earl Clark and Coach Steven Jackson lead the DMV Trilogy against Montrezl Harrell, Coach Dr. J, and the Chicago Triplets. The game played the way you love. Watch live Saturday on CBS at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, and catch replays Monday on BET. Presented by iHeart.